Indian tribes, also known as indigenous or tribal communities, are diverse groups with unique cultures, languages, and traditions. They inhabit various regions across India, often in remote and marginalized areas. These communities face numerous challenges that impact their way of life and well being.
I am 18. This was a deeply impactful film. They truly immersed us without illusion, without trying to hide any of the issues on the ground level in these indigenous communities. And we hear this time and time again, these cultural communities who are cut off from the capitalist centers and the economic centers, and how they are slowly dwindling because of the lack of respect, the lack of care, the lack of seeing what the purpose of them is, and the degradation of the cultural, the social, the economic, the educational standards. It's really disheartening to see people having to live in such conditions and that their way of life is so disrespected. So I think this was a really impactful piece because it evaluated from so many different perspectives and from so many different knowledge bases what is happening. And without getting inflammatory, just laying out the facts. And the call to action was abundantly clear that we need to hold governments accountable, that these are human beings with dignity, and they should have the autonomy to have proper drinking water and food and healthcare and access to power sources and have a say, because the culture, the languages, and simply human beings should be allowed to live where they would like to live, especially ancestral lands, without this kind of absolutely, it seems like they're forgotten. So these kind of films bring the awareness and make sure their perspectives are seen and heard, which is vital. So congratulations on this film. Really, really important. And I hope it gets out there.
I am 18. This doc gives a hugely comprehensive understanding of the landscape of this country, not geographically, but socially. And I love how it's structured, where the beginning talks about all these different components in society, environmental concerns, poverty, the job market, education, contextualizing all these things so that its second half can get to the real conversation it wants to have on child abuse and child marriage, and how the government is having trouble aligning itself and finding harmony and synchronicity with tradition. And this is not just a problem in India, it's a problem in many parts of the world, of course. What is definitely exemplified well here, though, is that it's not a black and white issue in the sense of how some are made to understand that certain things are socially acceptable and then are punished for it. So it goes to show that communication is so important. And what's great about docs like this is not so much their ability to inform the outside world, but to inform the very world that it is discussing and talking about. The more people within this world, within India, that can understand these issues, the more they can be educated to prevent them from recurring and having these secular issues happen in the future.
I am 18. I really enjoyed this. I thought that this was really informative, and I find such value in documentaries in general because they tend to spread knowledge about things that people don't readily know. And I love the format of learning about something in a documentary because I just find that it's easier to learn when you're actively engaged. And I think that this is such a great example of exactly that because I live in a very different place in the world, and I wouldn't have known about any of this, about the struggle, about the corruption, about all of the different challenges they're facing, from lack of education to lack of understanding and compassion when it comes to things like tribal traditions and what has been accepted for a long time in their own tribal community, and then imposing laws that they have no knowledge about onto their culture, and then having no resources to help them. And it's not just that. I mean, that's a big part of it, but also the lack of education, the lack of resources, the lack of any kind of, like I said, compassion for these people from their own government, that they're, trying to take their lands and, setting them up for failure in a lot of different ways, with even with the lands that they do have and the utilities and the, like I said, the access to things like education and the access to things like groceries and jobs and, basic living, necessities. And I wouldn't have known about any of this without a documentary like this, and I love that. And I think they did such a great job of fully explaining what all of the different things that they have to come up against and all the different things that they're fighting and that they continue to struggle with. And they really explained the kind of dynamic and made it more understandable from the point and the perspective of, these are how people in these lands operate and do things, and does that maybe need to be updated? Sure, but there are ways to do that in a compassionate way, and I think that it was just such an informative documentary.
This documentary brings awareness to something that most people probably don't know is going on in India. It's tragic because it sounds like the laws are being made, but they're leaving the tribal people behind. And they're not educating them about these laws that are being made, essentially entrapping them to get arrested. Like they said, their tradition is by 16, 17, girls are typically getting married, boys are, and the law has gone ahead of that, saying that's illegal, and it kind of entraps these people where the country of India is not educating them. This documentary is great for that awareness because it often shows how many countries just leave people behind. I think it happens quite often with Indigenous people, and this documentary really shows that. It has gorgeous cinematography as well. The cinematography really shows the beauty of the tribal areas that these people are living in of India. I love that sometimes the narration, the dialogue of the documentary would break it up with some poems throughout it, because it made it a little easier to watch, because it would break out from the monotone dialogue to explain everything and to put something to make it a little more beautiful through that poetry by telling people stories. It does really feel like these people are in a bad situation where they're stuck in their tribal customs, and they have a government system that's not even bothering to educate them about what is going on, what laws are being passed, so that when they get arrested, it really feels like a trap to people who don't know any better. So this documentary, going far and wide, particularly in the country of India, might tell people that you need to stop leaving the tribal people behind and at least go educate them about the laws that they are passing, so that they don't accidentally find themselves getting arrested.
This film is called I Am 18. This was an incredible documentary. Before watching it, I knew nothing of the tribal Indian tradition of marriage. Very interesting. So many expressive faces of both children and adults were captured on film. The cinematography of the area was fabulous, as was the gentle music, which was very fitting. The narrator's voice was rich and sympathetic. I was impressed by the wide variety of interviews of professionals in the area who really care about protecting, educating, and encouraging these people. It's obvious that more needs to be done, but it's good to see that this film was made to educate. Well done. I am 18. Check it out.